All right, if you are stepping in and you're joining us in our Topper Career Talks, we'll get started in just a few moments after we let a few more folks into the room, so stay tuned. We've got a great panel coming up for y'all tonight. Denise, Karen, what do y'all think? Should we start up? Give it a few more minutes.
Go ahead and get started. I think 5 minutes is a great time.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. My name is Jason De La Rosa. I'm the Director of Career and Professional Development. And so thank you for joining us for our Topper Career Talks brought to you by the Alumni Association and Career and Professional Development. So tonight, we have a great panel for you. And first, we're going to go over a few housekeeping items. So just a few Zoom tips, right? So please make sure that everybody has their mics muted, and we'll open it up to questions later on after the event has kind of gone underway. So to submit any questions, please use the Zoom chat feature. Our team will be monitoring the chat and they'll present those to us as we go forward. To have the best view of the panelists, consider changing your Zoom view from gallery to speaker view. That feature is located in the top right of your screen. It's going to say either gallery or speaker view. We're gonna have a slide deck though to start things off. So that won't matter a whole lot until we actually get to the panelists. So the past 6 months of COVID-19 have really brought the global economy to a halt, right? And it's really made people think about whether or not they're in the right profession. And maybe they're thinking if this is the right time to really start over and start with a career makeover. So for tonight's Topper Career Talk, we'll be discussing different techniques and strategies that you can implement to make the career change that you might be thinking about. So to do that, we're actually going to hear from 3 really awesome panelists who are all St. Ed's alums. So here are our panelists. So we have Steffanie Ngo-Hatchie, who graduated in 10, Degen, who also graduated in 10, and CJ Harris, who graduated in 08. So I'm going to turn off the slide deck for now, and Steffanie's going to tell us a little bit about her story, and then we'll move on to Kat and then on to CJ before we open things up for questions. So perfect. I'm going to hush and turn it over to Steffanie. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm Steffanie Ngo-Hatchie. I am an Austin native and graduated from St. Edward's in 2010, actually as a theater major. And then fast forward 10 years and a couple of cities later, I'm now in South Florida, and I am a senior managing director for our Physicians Perm division at the Execu Search Group, which is a staffing and recruiting firm headquartered out of Manhattan. And we now have 10 offices throughout the US and growing. So I guess to kind of start from the beginning, when I was 18, I was very confused. I was not one of those people that like by 5 years old knew exactly what I was going to do. So I was a classically trained singer. My vocal coach at the time was becoming the head of the music department at St. Ed's. St. Ed's also gave me the most money, so it just kind of made sense. So by the time I had graduated St. Ed's, I was very thankful for my, Bachelor of Arts degree that was well-rounded, because I definitely knew I was not meant for the life of a performer, not nearly as like gypsy as I thought I was. So you know, I kind of started trying to think of like, oh my gosh, what's next? Well, so also graduating in 2010, you know, that's right after the Great Recession. I remember our, you know, graduation, our, you know, the speaker, Dr. George Martin, you know, he like does the big speech, and it was very like doom and gloom. Like he did not mince words. He was talking about us like, you know, entering the job market during one of the worst economies like ever in history. Which was really scary for a lot of my really smart friends who had like really clear ideas of what they were going to do that just like went up into smoke. For me, I had no plans anyway. So I was just kind of being 22 and figuring out how I was going to survive, kind of like everyone else. I was a hostess at Uchi because I was like in college and it was like the fun thing to do. And I did that for a little bit after. And then about a year after that, some of the St. Ed's kids that, you know, I'd gone to school with, they were actually working the front desk of Bella Salon, which is still in East Austin, if anyone is interested. But so then they got me a job there. It was at least like a Monday to Friday job. After less than a year there, then they kind of promoted me to manager, and I managed that salon for a couple of years. So then it's 2012. The economy is doing better. All of the St. Ed's kids actually that I had started with were moving on to like jobs actually in their fields in their career at that point. And I felt like I wanted to do more, but even still, like I still didn't know what that was or what I wanted to do. So my sister was working for a law firm at the time, and they were using a staffing agency called the A-List Staffing. Suggested I reach out to them to see if they could help me. They ended up recruiting me internally. I had absolutely no idea what that job was. I didn't know that recruiters existed. I don't even think I fully understood like the job description. They just gave me a phone and a script and was like, I can do that. So I'm so glad though that I like wasn't scared to just like jump on it and say yes, because a year in, I realized that I really loved recruiting, but I really hated temp recruiting, and I needed to get out of office support, and I needed to kind of think long-term, because being a child of the Great Recession, I was like, what, you know, markets are the least likely to have a lot of ups and downs. And so for me, like that was healthcare and technology. So at that point, my life was kind of starting to go towards New York City. The boyfriend at the time, he's from New York. My parents had actually moved upstate New York for work. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna make a big change, like why not in Manhattan, right? So I just started interviewing, and which was really, really scary. I don't know, like being, you know, from Austin all the time, and then like interviewing like these really large, intimidating firms like in Manhattan. But I ended up getting the job that I have now. Did that for 2 years. They then promoted me and relocated me to open our South Florida offices in 2016. Then this past December, there was another promotion. So now I oversee a team that spans from New York down to South Florida, and you know, produces millions in revenue. And I'm really happy that, you know, even now we're starting to face more uncertainty, but you know, because I kind of started my career during an uncertain time, and I kind of thought through you know, what I needed to do, I'm somewhat in a good position. And we'll go more into that, I guess, later, like the tricks and the trades of that.
Thanks so much, Steffanie. And so we'll open up to questions in a little bit, but now Kat will tell us a little bit about her story and how she got from where she was in undergrad to where she is now.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So my name is Catherine. I go by Kat, and I graduated from St. Ed's in December of 2010. I actually was a transfer student, so I did my first 2 years of undergrad at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is where I'm from. I grew up in Madison, and at some point I just decided I needed to leave home, and so I decided to move to Austin, and I transferred to St. Ed's. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I had majored in all sorts of things coming out of Wisconsin: art, education, art history, I ended up being a Scandinavian studies major for a little bit. But I came to St. Ed's and I started taking some of the core classes, those like the CULF ones that we had to take. And I ended up getting a degree in women's and gender studies through the interdisciplinary studies team. So I created the degree because the department didn't exist. And it was great, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I think my main goal was just to finish school since I had transferred and taken a couple of semesters off. So I graduated without any sort of plan really or knowing what I wanted to do. Ideally, I was thinking like, I would love to be a professional feminist, but that's not super lucrative. So I considered, you know, kind of jumping into politics or doing something, but the big thing for me was whether I was going to stay in Texas or head back to the Midwest where I'm from. So I decided to move to Chicago. So I moved to Chicago without a job. I moved with a friend who was living in Minnesota at the time, and I just started taking on part-time sales jobs. So I worked at a kitchen store, and then I got a job at a baby boutique in kind of a fancy neighborhood in Chicago. And that turned into a full-time job as an assistant manager and then as a regional manager. And we opened up a second store and an online store. And so I was really thinking like, okay, I think I'm going to be in like the small business community. I'm going to, you know, maybe I'll think about business school. I wasn't really sure, but I really liked the community aspect of it. And I had always sort of had this interest in women's health and children and childbirth. And so I had thought, you know, maybe I'll at some point finish up my like doula certification, which is a professional birth partner. Works a lot with midwives and then also in hospitals to help people during the birth process. But then my time at the baby stores ended quite abruptly because the people who owned them, it turns out, were not following all the laws and were actually running a Ponzi scheme. And so the stores closed very abruptly and I was without a job and kind of sort of scrambling to figure out what to do. I used a couple staffing agencies. I picked up a couple part-time jobs here and there. But I ended up landing actually at an advertising agency, which turned out to be really great. I was an executive assistant for a couple of different teams and then ended up being promoted to be the executive assistant for the managing director and the executive creative director. It was a big agency here in Chicago. We had about 300, but offices all over the country and then a couple international as well. But what that job sort of led me to, I think, realize was that I didn't want to be doing something in the corporate world. There were a lot of things I really liked about it, but it ultimately wasn't super fulfilling. And I didn't see myself following in an account management track or a project management track. I didn't really want to be doing that. So I came back to sort of my first ideas about women's health and children and sort of the interest in midwifery and being a doula. And I decided to think about nursing school. And so I started taking classes at night. I was working full time, about 50 hours a week. And then I started taking some science classes after work just to kind of see how I liked biology and anatomy and chemistry and microbiology. And I ended up really liking it. And so I applied to a couple of different nursing programs and I got in. And so now I'm currently finishing up. I have one more term, so I'll graduate in December, a master's in Master's of Science in Nursing. And then I will also sit for a clinical nurse leadership role as well. So I'm at a place called Rush University. It's a huge hospital medical facility in Chicago that does a lot of different things, but I'm doing that and I'm not totally sure what sort of nursing I'm going to go into, but this has sort of given me the opportunity to completely shift gears and go into healthcare, which, as you can imagine, is a scary field right now, but also a field that has somewhat better job security than a lot of other fields. So, and it's a field that's very important all the time, but especially during a pandemic, being able to be someone who is a constant calm presence and can answer health questions and field sort of the public health crisis that's going on has been really fulfilling and great. So that's where I'm at.
All right. Thank you so much, Kat. And so I'm just going to hand it right over to CJ, who needs no introduction.
Yeah.
Go for it, CJ.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Unlike Steffanie and Catherine, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I went to my undergrad. I graduated from University of Houston with a bachelor's degree in information systems technology. I love computers, and my minor was training and development. So I'm one of those types of individuals that I read and learn a lot and I want to share it. I don't care where it's at. It could be a happy hour or it could be at a baby shower. I just want to share what I know, right? So I graduated, moved to Austin, and started my first career as a systems analyst with Texas Department of Public Safety. Those of you who are in Texas, if you look at your driver's license, that was my first major project. And I am incredibly proud of that because when I was a kid, it would take like 6 months to get your license. And I couldn't understand why that was, right? And I had no idea I'd be working on the project to make it a digital fast turnaround service. So I'm really, really excited about that. And in that process, I met a lot of consultants. One was from IBM. And he asked me, he said, you seem like a smart young lady. What are you doing working for the state? And I was like, that's the only people that was going to hire me. And he said, well, look, I think I can get you on at IBM. And I said, sure, no problem. I gave him my resume and he took it. And I instantly got an interview within like maybe 2 months. That was quick back in that day. Okay, I just want to put that out there because I'm old. So anyway, that was really quick 2 month turnaround because we didn't have the internet like we have it now. And so I got the interview, got the job, worked at IBM, and just took off like a butterfly. I mean, I was in my technical dream. You couldn't be at any place better, and I still love IBM for this opportunity. And so I moved really, really quickly. I got promoted really fast, and then I got into management. For the technical people on the call, when you get into management, it's a whole different story. So that's where I started strengthening my business skills and identifying who would be a good team member to come join my team. And I worked with HR on recruiting people for my team. And then I figured it out. I really like recruiting. I mean, I loved it. And so I loved it so much to where when my peers had to go, who would they send? CJ. They were like, we don't like it. Most engineers don't want to talk to a group of people. One-on-one, we're fabulous, maybe even 2 or 3. But when you got to talk to a room full of people, that's not our thing, right? And so I had so much practice at it. And working with the HR team, I got really, really good at it. And so I started recruiting for them. And I was away from the office anywhere from maybe, I would say 8 to 15 days a year. And so I started looking into how could I get into recruiting? Is that even a job? And I went to the HR team and I said, hey, I would love to do what you guys do full time. And they said, yeah, why don't you apply for a couple of positions? Here's one thing I didn't know. Engineers make a lot of money. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize how much money we made compared to HR. So my salary was around the same as a director in HR. So I couldn't come in at an entry level making the kind of salary I was making. So they told me that, you know, if I went back to school, then maybe I could come in as a new hire. And I was like, this just isn't going to work. So when we had an opportunity to participate in a work reduction layoff, could you say, I raised my hand because, and I'll tell you why more, but I raised my hand. And then I went back to school, worked on my HR certification, passed the test the first time. And the sad part of that was that nobody wanted to hire me in HR. Everybody kept wanting me to be a software engineer or a software developer. And so I ended up having to form my own company. So I formed my own company, started working with some startups, and that's how I got my experience in talent acquisition. And from there, believe it or not, an IBM colleague called me up and said, hey, haven't heard from you, haven't seen you on LinkedIn active. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing talent acquisition consultant for 2 startups. And she said, well, look, we have a talent acquisition manager position open at National Instruments. I think you'd be perfect. I know your managerial background. Come talk to us. So I came, I talked, got the job instantly, and I've been working in talent acquisition ever since. And so it's probably been a total of about 10 years. And as we move through this presentation, I'm happy to share with you some of the tips and tricks and the challenges I ran into. So I'm happy to be here, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks to all 3 of you for sharing kind of the broad overview. I know that y'all kind of went on the fast forward to go through your lives, you know, undergrad to where you are now. So you've touched on some of this, but I think the first question I have to all 3 of you, and we'll just kind of kick it off with CJ since you just finished up there. Like, in a million years, would you ever have thought this is where you're going to end up? Is this where you saw yourself?
No. In fact, technical people think HR people are fluffy. And so I never wanted to be fluffy, but I had a great opportunity to get my master's degree at St. Ed's. And that experience transformed the way I looked at HR as a profession and management as a profession. Because when you really think about it, I don't care what position you are in HR, you are a strategic person. You're always thinking about the future, whether it is to retain people, gain people, succession planning. I mean, it is really strategic. And so I was like, man, I had no idea. These people do more than just, hi, how you doing? You know, I mean, it just opened my whole eyes up to, I could now see myself here. But back 20 years ago, no way, never, ever, never, ever.
Kat?
No, never, ever. I second that wholeheartedly. I avoided science classes, especially in undergrad. I took exactly what I needed to do to fulfill my requirement and definitely did not get A's in them. And so for me, you know, nursing is not, you have to have a strong science foundation so that you understand pathology and the way that diseases work and the way that, you know, the human body works. But it also combines social work and education and communication and being able to manage, you know, like case management, care management, navigating the insurance system, customer service. I mean, my gosh, talk about, you know, dealing with people who are in really horrible situations, sometimes the worst situation of their lives, and kind of having to help them navigate that and make it less terrible. So it's a combo of all of those. But to start, you have to pass anatomy, physiology, you have to pass chemistry. And that was incredibly challenging for me. But I think in my undergrad, especially at St. Ed's, I was really focused on the humanities and taking lots of classes where I could read a bunch of awesome books and discuss things and write papers. And but I didn't really know what that was leading to. And so for me, grad school has been really nice because even if science isn't what I'm super passionate about, and I do love a lot of things about science, it's nice to kind of have a goal and see what I need to accomplish in order to get there, and know that this foundation is building on something that's going to take me further in a way that I didn't really understand when I was an undergrad. I think in part just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But then being able to kind of focus and, you know, CJ, like you were saying for HR, it sort of opens up this whole world where I'm like, oh, being a nurse also is incredibly broad. I mean, I could be a nurse and have a 9-to-5 job and work in an office. I could work for a nursing society. I could go into public policy. I could go into politics. There's a number of incredible nurses who are in office right now. So it really is this nice perspective in terms of making it more broad for me in a way that I never thought I would do this in a million years, ever. Yeah. So, but I'm glad I did. It's turned out.
Steffanie?
Yeah, I think I have what would have been characterized as the absolute worst job possible for me if you had asked me at in my early 20s. Like, because all I do all day long is I call strangers. Most of them don't want to talk to me. And I just get so much rejection every day. And me at 19, 20, 21, 22, if you told me that's what I was going to be doing now, I would have just cried. But I think something that, you know, both for CJ and Kat and for me, I think it's so funny that a lot of our lessons were learned through necessity, right? You had to get a job, so you just went out there and you just kind of figured it out. And the times that you surprise yourself, right? And the times you're like, oh, actually, I am good at that. Why did I keep telling myself that I'm not good at that, right? And that journey. So I think too, don't ever feel like you failed or something. If man, this isn't the job. This isn't where I thought I was going to be. Everything is a journey and everything has a place. And so don't doubt that. And even if it takes 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 steps, you're heading down the right path. And we all have had jobs that we hated. And we all have had moments where it's we just kind of got to suck it up and get through this patch. But you will learn from something, and you're going to be really grateful that you got that lesson moving forward.
Yeah, and I think to build off of that, I think that's so important. There are so many things that I did that I never thought I would do that ended up connecting me to someone who connected me to something else. And so always sort of jumping in those experiences, even if I feel like it's not something I want to do long term, it could be a really valuable lesson, like Steffanie was saying, or it could lead to something totally different. I never thought I would work in advertising, but I worked at an agency that provided tuition reimbursement. And so that was a big thing for me, that they were helping pay for me to go back to school, even though it wasn't to study advertising. So finding a company that maybe isn't doing exactly what you think you want to do, but provides for you to have a life outside of work is also really nice. And that's one of the things that I think about with nursing too. I'm really excited to work like 3 or 4 days a week and have the other days off. Because at the end of the day, I am super excited to be a nurse, but I'm also super excited to do things other than my job. So to be able to like have a family, travel, read a library book that doesn't involve anatomy or germs, you know, I think that sometimes we're so focused on like, I have to have a career that defines me. And I don't think that that necessarily has to be the case. Sometimes it's, I have to do something that's going to provide insurance and some money and some stability, but you know, maybe it's not the thing that defines who I am, or maybe it's not the thing that I do forever.
Yeah, and as a talent acquisition professional, I just got to sneak this in because Catherine is like, she led the way for me to say this. The average person will change professions anywhere from 3 to 4 times in their lifetime. So I personally think with the new generation, that number will probably double, because no one continues to be a railroad conductor for the rest of their lives. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's so apparent in my role. I can see it because I'm looking at all these different resumes, right? And I can see where they used to be a photographer, or they used to be a scientist, and now they're this and that. And so it's becoming very, very the norm. So if anybody on this call kind of feels like, you know, I was majoring in music and I'm now into real estate, honey, you're on the right track. Don't worry about it. You're good. You're normal.
So I'm going to go back to something that Steffanie mentioned that just made me think of another question. So I'm going to go off script for a second here. You mentioned the idea of like a bad job or a bad experience. For all three of you, what is maybe the best lesson you learned from like a bad job or a bad work experience? And we'll start with whichever one of you wants to go for it.
I mean, I guess I'll go. So the salon that I had mentioned that I went to, so that was about as catty and ridiculous as you think it would be. And there were so many moments where me, and especially my like much smarter friends that like, you know, needed to be doing way bigger and better things, we were just like, oh my God, how, after putting all of this work, you know, into this degree, and now we're stuck in this economy and forced to deal with like these crazy people, right? But like, I think that I would be a very different person if I hadn't gone through those couple of years, because I can deal with literally any personality now. And there were mistakes. There were times that I made people cry. Like, I don't think I'm a mean person, but like, you know, there's definitely things like when emotions are high, there's do's and don'ts. And I learned that really hard, you know, in that salon. And that's definitely something that, you know, I carry through now, and learning, you know, the appropriate way to kind of maybe come about situations and problem solving and dealing with totally very different personalities.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think I don't know that I've hated any of the jobs that I've had, but I certainly have had moments or parts of them that I really have disliked. And I think, you know, a lot of times a job that I wouldn't necessarily love was made really awesome because I was working with really great people. So even if it's an instance where I don't necessarily love the work that I'm doing, if I'm surrounded by people that are great, that becomes less important for me. I do think that you can absolutely tell a difference in my grad program right now, people who went right from like high school to undergrad to graduate school and have never worked at a restaurant, have never worked at retail, have never worked service industry, because those things are invaluable. Like Steffanie was saying, you learn how to deal with every type of person, every type of situation, people who are upset, people who are sad, people who are angry, people who want to just vent and yell at you because you're the person standing there, like telling them they can't return something. You know, those are really good skills to develop no matter where you go and no matter what you do. But they are also really hard. I work as a nursing assistant right now through nursing school. And that is one of the hardest jobs that I think that I've ever done. For 12 hours, you're cleaning people, you're taking their temperature and their vitals, you're turning them. And a lot of times you're the person who can't provide pain relief because I can't give medication, but I have to be in there anyway to just hold their hand or to help clean them up or whatever they need. But it is giving me a very strong appreciation for the work that everyone does at the hospital and not just a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist. So.
Yeah, I'm going to say my trying moment, because again, I knew what I wanted to do. I was in technology. I loved it. But it was when I got into management where you had to have the balance of being technical and a people person. And it was just too much for me. So one day I went on vacation with my kids. Oh, by the way, I became a mom. That added another job, right? So I became a mom and we went on vacation in Santa Fe. I'll never forget it. And it was a Oprah episode. I don't know why we was watching Oprah on vacation, but we were. And the kids were playing, we're watching Oprah, and the whole topic was about these professional Black women who had left corporate America for a work-life balance and doing things that they love and still spend time with their children. And I just started crying. I mean, I just broke down. And my husband was looking at me like, we're on vacation, what's wrong? And I was like, but do you realize I've missed them walking. I've missed them crawling. I've missed so many opportunities with my children because my behind was always at work. Because in technology, it changes so fast. So one month I may be working 12, 15-hour days, and then I come home and I'm exhausted. I want to sleep or, throw a ball around for them, and then I got to go back to work. And so that's when I said, I got to do something different. I can't have all these roles and miss out on life, because one day they're going to be 21 and I ain't going to remember. I ain't going to have no pictures. I ain't going to have nothing, to refer to. So I had great jobs. It's just that my lifestyle had changed, which made my job difficult. So that's when I started thinking I got to do something different.
So I think that's a really good transition to a few of the questions that I've gotten in the chat, but also I was thinking about as well. And I think Steffanie and CJ, you might have some really good insight into this, but like as from a recruiting perspective, what happens? What does it look like? What would you recommend for like a stay-at-home parent or somebody who just took a break from working who wants to go back into the workforce after 10, 15, 20 years? How do they get back into it and be taken seriously?
Right. So I'm going to just put a couple of thoughts out there. One, you can always do volunteer work. So many people do not put volunteer work on their resume. They think that they only can put on the resume what you were paid for. So that's one thing I would highly recommend. And I've talked to some mothers who are thinking about transition back in the workforce. And I'm like, you probably put a lot of work in at the elementary school. And those are still skills, customer service skills, whether you organize files, whether you create a website, put those things out there. And then the second thing is, don't be afraid to do a home-based business. It doesn't have to bring in a lot of money. Again, don't tie how much money I made needs to go on the resume. What we're looking for is skills. What we're looking for is what were you doing in between that time that you were not doing the job that you want to do, But definitely home-based businesses, volunteer work, and stay connected with an association that you have an interest in. Because in that way, you may be able to participate in some free webinars, some classes, and just keep your skills fresh. So when you are ready to come and interview, you're talking 2020 skills and not 1980 skills. Because we're going to look at you like, what are you talking about? We said SEO and you're talking about OES. So you have to make sure you don't lose contact with what is going on in the market. And I'm going to let Steffanie add.
Yeah, so I think there's two different ways I look at it. So I remember when I was trying to get like my first professional job, and keep in mind my resume says theater major and then a bunch of restaurant jobs and then salon, right? So it was super, super hard for me to get employers to take me seriously. And it was just a lot of rejection. I made my intro sound really like short and sweet, say, oh, and then I went to A-list staffing and they hired me on the spot. Y'all, it was like 6 months of just people saying no, or worse, just not even answering. Like, I submitted my resume literally to anyone, anywhere, anyhow. I think, obviously, hey, like, luck a little bit comes into it, but you can't give up. You have to persevere. You also have to kind of connect the dots for them, right? So if you're looking at a job description and they say, and they have these different words that, like, and like keywords kind of, the more you can be like, hey, so I did this, which kind of translates into that, so that those words pick up, then it's helpful. I think now, fast forwarding 10 years and kind of how I now try to build out my career and what I'm thinking about, I do think about how can I continue to build on skills and make myself more marketable. Obviously, like, it's a good habit to get in. Like, if you haven't been doing that already, like, definitely start now and start planning out your career with this in mind. So absolutely what CJ said, you have to join local organizations. I did Young Women's Alliance when I was in Austin. I do Junior League now here in Palm Beach. And even both organizations, so you get like a role within it, right? So if you don't do this in your day job, but you're kind of interested in getting this skill set, then just apply to do that role, do fundraising, do marketing, do whatever it is for that organization. And then you can put that on your resume. And then also both of those organizations, and I think a lot of organizations will sponsor scholarships for like industry learning. So I know that like Junior League always does scholarships every year. They send like 15 of us to leadership training. They've also done off and on different things like around like, like PowerPoint and Word and different things like that. And obviously there's a million other different kinds of organizations too. Like there's chambers of commerce and things like that. That stuff really helps.
And I'm going to add too, right? Oh, Kat, go for it before I jump on in.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think they are both right. And I would say keep track of everything you do. That is a huge thing that, like, when I go to update my resume, I have just a running document. And so like even this, before this started, I have a document of all of the professional development that I'm doing. And when I sign up for something, when I register for a webinar, when I say like, oh, yep, I'm going to volunteer, I put it on that document so that it's on there before I've even completed it. So then all I have to do is like go in and take some notes about what it was and how much time it ended up being. And that is a huge thing. I have to do that anyway for graduate school because we have to do a certain amount of professional development, but it also is really nice to jog your memory. And if you think like, oh, hey, I met this person at this volunteer thing and they gave me their card or they mentioned this, I'm going to reach out to them. It's amazing what sort of network you can build just with doing stuff like this or, registering for different things. And you just never know who you're going to meet or what path that's going to take you on.
So Kat, you basically read my mind. Thank you very much. So with this, right, like I think that the first time I was on a panel with CJ, we weren't connected on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And then right before this panel, I connected with Steffanie and Kat. And so one of the things that I'm just going to say right now is it's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. And so I have certainly had a lot of friends. I've had colleagues who have been connected to the job they really wanted in that moment or their forever job based on who they got introduced to via LinkedIn or who they met at a happy hour. I know we can't really go do the happy hour thing right now, but a lot of it's going to boil down to like networking and getting the word out there and getting recommendations on LinkedIn or having somebody say, hey, this person is skilled in public speaking, or this person is skilled in these other transferable skills that are going to translate into that job when they're looking for an applicant tracking system. Say, hey, this person does meet these things, even if it's not the exact same industry that I'm in.
True.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, I'm a terrible LinkedIn user. I will admit that right now. I am not good about it. I've updated it a couple of times and I accept all the requests, but I don't do a whole lot on it, which is probably terrible for the recruiters who are listening to this.
No, it's not.
But I am also very comfortable reaching out to people that I met once and saying, hey, my name is Kat. You talked about this thing that was really awesome. Could we grab coffee? Or could we hop on Zoom for a few minutes? Or could I shadow you? And especially in graduate school, I have done that with almost every single nurse that I've met. I just shadowed last week a wound and ostomy care nurse. I don't think that I want to do wound nursing, but I got to follow her around for 4 hours and pick her brain about how she got to where she is, what she's doing now, you know, what her job entails. I got to see a lot of the back end of it. So it was like a different type of nursing than I have been exposed to in a lot of different ways. And I think that is so valuable. Ask people to shadow. People who like what they do will love to talk to you about what they're doing, and they'll want to share it and bring you into the circle, kind of. I know that sounds crazy, but I love to talk to people about what I'm doing, and I love to talk to people about what I did before if that's what they want to do. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and just say, hey, could we chat about what you did or what your experience was? Or, you know, and even if it really is like, hey, I want you to put in a good word for me at this specific location. I don't usually phrase it like that, but people love to do that. And I love to do that for people too. So if I know someone who I can connect someone with, I always offer that up. And I think that's so important. Don't be afraid to ask, because people love to do that.
Right. And I was going to add to what Catherine said. She was strategic about it. She connected with nurses because she's in nursing, right? So have a purpose to who you're trying to connect with. Yes, I'm in talent acquisition. I'm recruiting. I know other recruiters, but connecting with me and you want to work in finance is not a good idea. I mean, majority of my circle is technology. I've always recruited in technology. I'm in biotech right now, but if Steffanie is more broad than I am, that's who you want to connect with, because she could probably connect you with someone in finance. But coming to me and say, hey, I'd like to be in your professional network, and do you know any recruiters in finance? You making me work too hard. So I'm gonna probably say no, no. But if you're interested in technology or you're interested in life sciences, man, we can talk all day, because that's my what you want to call it, that's all in my backyard. So be strategic about it. And if you're going to use LinkedIn, I always tell people, don't send a request to a recruiter without sharing what is it that you want. Because a lot of times we get so many, I can't even express to you how many we get. But when a person says, hey, I saw you speak at St. Ed's, I'd like to, you know, pick your brain about how did you transition from being an engineer into HR? Now we're talking. I'm gonna make some time for you, because I feel like we've already connected, even though I don't see your faces. But if you just send me a LinkedIn request with nothing, it's gonna sit there for a while. I mean, the only reason I may accept is because you're in the loom. But if you weren't, it's gonna sit there for a long time, because I have a mountain of invites and I have no idea why these people want to connect with me.
Steffanie, anything you want to add?
Well, I was just going to say exactly what CJ said, is that like my job as a recruiter, like I help make, you know, connections and relationships happen, but I'm not a decision maker. Half the time I'm talking to, you know, clients or, you know, hiring managers or something, and they're like, no, I want to talk to this person. I want to talk to this person. Right. So, I mean, like, I love to connect, obviously. Like, if I didn't like to talk to people, like I probably wouldn't be doing this. I'm always happy to connect with you and things, but like 100%, like I think you do have to be strategic, and like, are you actually reaching out to people that have something to offer or some like information to provide? Like I do physician recruiting. I don't know anything about like, I'm not a doctor. Like you can't pick my brain about like, oh, well, what was it like? You know, how did you choose what residency you went into? Like, what was it like working under this program director? Like, I don't know. I haven't been through that process, right? But I do think that finding mentors, or like I always call it like people in your circle, like it's a community is so important to me. Like when I moved to Manhattan, now that like moving to South Florida, like the first thing I do is I find really good people and create like my tribe, because those are the people that bring opportunities to you. Right. And then when you get an opportunity, they're the people that will help prop you up and say nice things about you and connect you with the people that you need. Like if you don't have that community around you and people to say really nice things about you and to connect you with decision makers in like different areas, like I would start thinking about that.
So I'm going to add to that idea of community, right? So I think that if, you know, I'm seeing some questions about like, hey, how do I find that community? How do I find the tribe? You have a really quick and easy one right in front of you, right? So we're all connected to St. Ed's in some way, shape, or form, right? Like y'all graduated from there. A lot of us in the room work there. And I think that that's a nice natural transition. See who we're connected to. I run the career office, so feel free to send me a LinkedIn request. Let me know, hey, I was in that panel the other night listening in. And check out who I've got. Like, go through my list of people and see if there's anybody that I could connect you to. I might say, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about you first before I make that connection, just so I make sure that I'm making a good referral. But I'm gonna make a quick plug, shameless plug, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit more about, or I'm gonna ask one more question before we close into the end of this. So Paris asked whether or not St. Ed's offers resources or counseling for alumni to make a career shift. Yes, the Career and Professional Development Office serves current students and alumni for life. So all you have to do is contact the career office and let us know you want to set up an appointment, and we're more than happy to talk to you about resume, career shifting, LinkedIn, all the fun jazz. But before we go into the shameless plugging much further, I want to ask the panelists, when you think about your St. Ed's education, what would you say helped prepare you for this field? Even, I mean, because I think for all three of you, the degree you got didn't necessarily jive with what you are doing all the way, right? It didn't seem like a natural thing to anybody who's looking from the outside. But how did your SCU education help prepare you for the position you're currently in? And bonus question, how do you think it'll prepare you if you decide to switch again?
Can I go first? Please, please, please. Okay. So I got my master's in organizational leadership and ethics. And at that time, I was a software development manager at IBM. And I truly believe it helped me in utilizing critical thinking to look at the professions, because I'm interested in HR, but I'm really geared into talent acquisition and learning development, right? So it gave me kind of a roadmap to be able to do a skills assessment of what I've acquired in this role, what I learned in school, undergrad and master's, and how to apply it to where I think I want to go. That's what I would say St. Ed's did for me. And I truly believe it will help me with my next role. I'm already looking at it. So I believe, you know, it gave me the vision, and it also gave me the critical thinking ability to look at it not from a lens of, well, I've never done this before, I should be afraid. It gave me the lens of, that seems really, really interesting. Let's go dissect that puppy and see how we can take it over.
Thank you. Steffanie, Kat?
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Yeah, so I think that the key things that St. Ed's did for me was, one, because I have like a full Bachelor of Arts, so they made me take like my social studies and my history and things like that, right? The critical thinking skills that came through, like one of the classes that I still to this day remember almost like verbatim is a ethics class that I taught with Dr. Wake. I think he's still there. But it completely made me rethink, you know, beliefs that were really close to me. And I never thought to question it. Like I questioned it for the first time, but it also like created a really clear thought process and not, and kind of like a lens in which to question things as it comes, right? And then the other key piece is communication skills, because you can have all the critical thinking in the world and you can have all of these ideas and thoughts, but if you can't get it through, it doesn't do you or the world too much, right? And like one of my employees, she always says, like, she's like, you're really good with words. Like that's how she like phrases it. But I think that being able to like really articulate, you know, where you're at helps. And like, so one of the examples I always think of is an exercise I do with my candidates, because I work with physicians who are really cerebral. Their people skills are not always there. So I'll ask them really basic interview questions, and I'll have them, do their response, and I'll say back to them like what I got from it and what I think, what they said, and it never matches. It never jives. And it's like a simple exercise, but I mean, it's something you can do even with yourself, or you can do it like friends or something like that. It's just making sure that you're getting your ideas or thoughts or message really clearly through.
Yeah, I think the critical thinking piece, absolutely, for sure. And the communication, like Steffanie was talking about. I also think in my case, I moved to Austin and started at St. Ed's as a transfer student, not knowing a single person other than an aunt who lived in Austin at the time. And so I had to go and create a whole new community. And I did a lot of the things that we've been talking about now. I joined student organizations. I went to, different things on campus. And it really took about a year, I think, before I developed a community. And it was a really rough transition. And I think that just being able to navigate that as a transfer student and finish school and be able to reconnect still. I mean, it's funny, when we first started this, Jason and I put it together that I actually had him as a professor in a class that I did horribly in. I think I maybe got a D in that class. But look at us, we're connected now, and we're talking and we're sharing, some of the stuff that we've learned with other people. I think just being able to survive that and think our way through it, talking about ethics, all of these things come to play in healthcare, and communication is absolutely key, and being able to critically think about what I'm seeing and putting all those pieces together. So I think ultimately having that strong humanities foundation has really helped. I didn't know it at the time, and I still am sort of like, wow, I wish I had done nursing when I was 22, because my feet hurt all the time now, and I'm in my 30s, and that's tough. But I wasn't there yet. I needed to kind of go through all of these different paths before I got here, and I think that it makes me a much stronger nurse and a stronger job candidate. I had zero science experience before I was applying to this program, zero healthcare experience, but I was able to sort of take what I had done, whether it was in student government or Unity Coalition, different things on campus, planning things, and parlay them into what, the skills that I could bring to the table as someone who is working in healthcare now. So I think, St. Ed's is great about that, about, really building that cultural foundation and reinforcing the critical thinking, and also just a community. I met some of my very best friends there, and I still have this awesome community of people in Austin. And if I ever want to go into politics or public transit or back into advertising, I've got a lot of people there who I still keep in touch with, and that's really important.
So I'm glad that all three of you touched on this. So there's this organization called NACE. It's the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And so they poll employers every single year. And for the past decade, something like 70 to 80% of employers say that the major you had matters very, very little. There's consistent things that pop up every single year. And so it's critical thinking, problem solving skills, the ability to work as a member of a team, and communication. Those things are always at the top of the heap. And coming out of a writing intensive institution that makes you work in groups, guess what? You're going to learn some skills at some point, whether you like it or not. So I'm going to get off my soapbox for a hot second and kind of go back to the slideshow and do some of that shameless plugging that I promised. So we encourage you to connect with the Career and Professional Development Office. We have a shiny brand new website. It's career.stedwards.edu, and our team of career coaches are really here to help you with your resumes, your LinkedIns, cover letters, interview prep when you get those interviews. And sometimes it's just a matter of talking to somebody. I think that having somebody who doesn't know you, who can provide a very objective conversation with you about hey, well, what is it that you want to do? What do you think you're good at? Because I think that Steffanie mentioned this earlier. Sometimes when we ask people what they're good at, doesn't always jive with what they are actually legit good at. Our ability to report things back isn't always the best. So we might need to do some assessments with you and help pull those things out. We do have a job and internships listing for students and alumni. I think that our alumni have kind of shied away from going into Hilltop Careers, But as alums, you have access to a database where employers are posting just for St. Ed's folks or a cohort of other colleges. But I was looking at that. We have about 6,000 jobs in there right now. 6,000 jobs are internships. And some are clearly not for our undergrad students. They are for working professionals. And some of them, they're saying, if you want a career change, this might be something for you to look into. So how do you actually reach us? Email us, seucareer@stedwards.edu. That's probably the best way to get in contact with us. We do have our phone number, but because most of our operations are remote right now, we're checking that voicemail a few times a day. And there will always be somebody who calls you back within about 24 hours, but the email, somebody will get back to you with about an hour or two. Again, look at our nice new website. There is a page dedicated solely for alumni operations. But I'm going to pass it over to Gabby so she can kind of close out to the rest of the slides that we have for the night.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name's Gabby, and I work with the Alumni Association, and I'm also an alum, like all of these panelists today. Thanks again for being here. We've talked a lot about networking today and who you know, and that's very important and relevant to the Alumni Association. And so you can connect with us at any point in your alumni career. Once you graduate, you automatically become a member. And so it is a free resource for you, whether you want to network, whether you want to attend events, whether you want to grow as a professional or mentor someone. We're really here to help you be involved, whether that be through giving your time, talent, or treasure. Some of our coming events that we do have include an alumni town hall that's going to be on September 17th, an upcoming session of a Topper Career Talks on September 23rd, and also a Hilltop Learning Series on September 24th. So there's so many ways for you to be involved. As you know, we've had these monthly series, and I see some people that have already been attending all of them, so thank you. But for your friends who missed it, or if you just want to go back and review, these are recorded and are accessible afterwards. But we would love to see you live, because as you saw, you're able to ask the questions and really interact with all the panelists. So you will be able to do that if you're live. And I'll let Jason take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Gabby. So as she mentioned, we have some upcoming talks. So September 23rd, we're gonna bring in another round of participants and panelists to talk to us about how you can ace the interview when you get those interviews. And then October 28th, listen, we know that this is a really stressful time. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and if you're thinking about changing up your careers or just on the job hunt, you gotta take care of yourself. So we're gonna have a few mental health professionals on the panel to talk to you about optimism, wellness, and just taking care of yourself and dealing with the stress of looking for a career search in the middle of this kind of trying time. So we really appreciate all of you joining us tonight. I want to give a quick round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here, Steffanie, Kat, and CJ. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. But thank you to the alumni team for helping pull this event off. And with that, I hope all of you have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us. Take care.